Over the years of my service, I have heard hundreds of confessions and stories, but one of them particularly touched me. That evening, a woman entered my room. She stood at the door for a long time, as if she couldn't bring herself to speak. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling, and there was such pain in her eyes that I immediately understood that these were not just words, but a real tragedy. Today, I want to share her story with you. It is full of trials and unexpected twists, and everyone will find something familiar in it. This is what she told me. My house has never been just a structure of wood and stone. For me, Agatha Thorndike, this Victorian mansion in a quiet neighborhood of Oakland, is a living being, a witness to 74 years of my life. I was born here, in the second-floor bedroom, back in 1950. It was here that I said goodbye to my parents, celebrated my wedding to Henry, raised our daughter Willow, and mourned my husband 5 years ago. Every morning begins the same way. I wake up at 6:30 without an alarm clock, a habit I've kept since my days teaching at the university. My bedroom on the second floor overlooks the garden, which I stubbornly continue to tend myself, despite my daughter's protests. The old Persian rug feels nice under my bare feet as I get out of bed and put on my thin silver-rimmed glasses. On this spring Thursday morning, there was no sign of change. I made tea, not in bags, as my daughter likes, but real leaf Darjeeling, and went out onto the veranda with a worn volume of Jane Austen. The Auckland morning greeted me with a light mist and the scent of blooming magnolias. "Professor Thorndike is still sticking to his schedule," came the voice of my neighbor Harold Pettigrew, a 76-year-old retired sailor, trimming his hedge. "And Captain Pettigrew still hasn't learned to greet a lady with good morning," I replied, hiding a smile behind my cup. That's how my day began. Calm, measured, filled with small pleasures. Reading, gardening, corresponding with former students, weekly bridge games with friends. My family home, with its creaky stairs, stained glass windows, and a library that took up an entire room, gave me a sense of security and continuity. Until the phone rang. Mom? You remember that Baxter and I are coming over today, right?" Willow's voice sounded tense, as it always had lately. "Of course I remember. At 74, I don't suffer from senile dementia yet," I replied, knowing my daughter would frown at my tone. "That's not what I meant, and you know it," she sighed. "Did you get the documents I asked for? Which ones? My birth certificate, my will, or maybe my euthanasia consent form?" I couldn't resist being sarcastic. "Mom, we just want to help you manage your property. This house is too big for one person. It's expensive to maintain, and all my money goes to pay the bills instead of sitting in your bank account?" I finished for her. "Honey, I'm doing just fine. And I haven't prepared the documents because I'm not going to sign anything." There was a pause during which I could almost physically feel Willow counting to 10. "Okay, Mom. We'll talk when we get there. At 6, don't forget." I hung up and went back to my book, but the lines blurred before my eyes. These visits had become more frequent in recent months. Willow and Baxter came with boxes of things that were just cluttering up the house, folders of documents requiring my signature, and conversations about more compact living in a modern complex for active retirees. With 8 hours to go before their visit, I decided to enjoy my freedom. I put on my favorite blue blouse with an owl brooch, a gift from my late husband, and headed downtown. The bus stop was 2 blocks from my house, and I made a point of walking, ignoring my daughter's comments that, at your age, you need to conserve your energy. The Oakland Library greeted me with coolness and silence. Justin, the young librarian, nodded cheerfully. "Mrs. Thorndike! The books you ordered have arrived. Thank you, dear. And call me Agatha, as I've already told you." "Sorry, professional habit," he smiled. How's your article for the literary magazine coming along? Slowly but surely. Today's students have forgotten that Jane Austen was not only about love and happy endings, but also about social satire. After the library, I stopped by a small cafe called Eloise's, where I met Margaret and Beatrice, my friends from my teaching days. We discussed books, politics, and of course, children. My Caroline insists that I move to Seattle to live with them, Beatrice sighed. She says that my grandchildren miss me. But I know that after a week, I'll feel like a third wheel in their house. At least mine are honest, I said with a bitter smile. They just want my house. You're exaggerating, Agatha, Margaret said gently. Willow cares about you. Yeah, about as much as a vulture cares for an antelope dying in the desert. I sipped my tea. Yesterday, she sent a realtor, supposedly to assess the repairs. He walked around the house, looking like he was already mentally arranging the furniture for the new owners. When I got home at 5 o'clock, I found a box of groceries and a note on the doorstep. Mom, I brought you some food. You're too thin. See you tonight. Willow, the box contained ready-made salads, semi-prepared meals, and several bags of frozen vegetables. I sighed and took everything to the kitchen, where the pumpkin pie I had baked that morning was already waiting. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Willow and Baxter entered the house, as always, looking like inspectors checking on substandard housing. Mom, did you turn on the heat? It's cold in here. Willow immediately headed for the thermostat. It's 17 degrees outside and sunny. The house is quite comfortable. I grabbed her hand. And hello, by the way. Hello, Agatha! Baxter leaned down to kiss me on the cheek, and I smelled expensive cologne mixed with whiskey. How are you? Great. I'm writing an article for a literary magazine, participating in a book club, and planning a summer trip to Europe. Europe! Willow turned abruptly. Mom, you can't go to Europe alone at your age. Strange, at my age, Margaret Thatcher was running Britain, I remarked, leading them into the living room, where tea was already served. And I'm not going alone. I'm going with Margaret and Beatrice. 3 elderly women unaccompanied? That's crazy, Baxter interjected, accepting a cup of tea. Agatha, we're really worried about your safety. Is that why you sent someone to replace all my light bulbs with smart ones connected to your phones? I raised an eyebrow. To watch when I go to bed? Willow blushed. It's for your own safety. We'll know if you fall during the night and can't call for help. I've been living alone for 5 years since my father died, and I've never fallen. And I prefer not to have devices in my bedroom that are controlled by someone else. The conversation went in a familiar circle. My safety, my loneliness, my stubbornness. Tea was followed by dinner, during which Baxter cautiously broached the subject of possible options for investing the proceeds from the sale of the property. I remained silent, methodically cutting up the chicken I had prepared, according to my mother's recipe. Mom, listen. Willow put down her fork. Baxter and I have found an amazing option for you. A modern apartment in the Golden Autumn Complex for people over 65. It has everything: a medical center, a swimming pool, a library. And I'll live among other old wrecks, play bingo, and discuss my illnesses. No, thank you. But you love socializing. You yourself say that you sometimes feel lonely. I like to socialize with people I choose myself, I snapped. And yes, sometimes I feel lonely. But most often, when you come and try to decide for me how I should live. A heavy silence hung in the room. Baxter cleared his throat and changed the subject, talking about the latest achievements of their children, my grandchildren. Lawrence had been accepted into a master's program at business school, and Octavia was preparing for her final exams at art college. By the way, Octavia asked me to tell you that she'll be visiting next week, Willow said with a slight smile. She misses you. That was the only good news of the evening. Octavia, the youngest of my grandchildren, had inherited my love of art and literature. Unlike the rest of the family, she wasn't coming to suggest that I move or sell the house, but simply to spend time together. After dinner, when we went back to the living room, Willow suddenly took my hand. Mom, I have a suggestion. You seem tired lately. Because you're exhausting me with your visits, I muttered, but she ignored it. Baxter and I booked a weekend for you at the Sunny Valley Spa Hotel. It's an amazing place to relax and recharge. Everything is included: massages, swimming pool, organic food, 3 days of complete relaxation. I looked at my daughter suspiciously. Since when do you care about my relaxation? Mom? You're being unfair, Willow said, her voice tinged with hurt. Baxter and I spent a lot of time looking for the perfect place. And it's not cheap, by the way. Agatha, Baxter interjected in his business tone, this is a truly first-class establishment. Many of my colleagues have recommended it. It will be good for your health. I was hesitant. On the one hand, the idea of a vacation sounded tempting. On the other hand, their sudden generosity was alarming. But maybe I was being too cynical. Maybe they genuinely wanted to make me happy? When is this weekend? I finally asked. This Friday, Willow replied quickly. We'll pick you up at 10 in the morning and take you there. Everything has already been paid for. You just need to pack a small bag with your things. Tomorrow? So soon? I frowned. Why didn't you tell me earlier? It was difficult to organize. There were a lot of people interested, Baxter explained. We wanted to surprise you. Something in their tone, in the way they looked at each other, made me feel vaguely uneasy. But refusing would mean a new round of conflict, accusations of ingratitude and stubbornness. All right, I said finally. I'll go. But only for the weekend, and I want to be home on Monday. Of course, Mom. Willow beamed and hugged me. You'll love it, you'll see. I'll help you get ready. When they left, I sat in my favorite chair by the fireplace for a long time, thinking. Something was bothering me. A spa hotel? Sudden concern? Why now, when I had categorically refused to discuss selling the house? I got up and went to the old secretary, took out the phone book, and found the number of Edmund Chaffinch, my old friend and former colleague, now retired like me. Edmund was a lawyer and had helped me many times with advice. But it was late, and I decided to postpone the call until morning. Maybe I really was being overly suspicious. Before going to bed, I walked around the house, touching old photographs, books, and furniture that had seen my parents. All these things were not just objects. They were my history, my life. It's just a weekend, I reassured myself as I lay down in bed. What could happen in 3 days? But as I fell asleep, I decided to call Edmund in the morning anyway, just in case. Friday morning was surprisingly sunny. I woke up earlier than usual, at 5 o'clock, with a heavy feeling that I couldn't quite identify. Something between anticipation and anxiety. It would be rude to call Edmund so early, so I decided to wait until 7. As I packed a small bag for the trip, I wondered what to take with me to the spa hotel. Willow said they provided robes and everything else I would need, but I packed my favorite silk nightgown, a pair of comfortable shoes, a book by Muriel Spark that I had recently started, and a small photo of Henry in a silver frame. It always sat on my bedside table. At the last minute, I put my medications in my bag, even though Baxter assured me that Sun Valley had a medical center with all kinds of medications. At 7:05 a.m., I dialed Edmund's number, but got his answering machine. His velvety voice informed me that he would be unavailable until Monday due to a lawyers' conference in San Francisco. I left a message saying that I was going to a spa hotel called Sunny Valley for the weekend and asked him to call me back on Monday. It wasn't that I seriously expected any problems, but something about Willow and Baxter's behavior bothered me. At exactly 10 o'clock, Baxter's black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Willow jumped out of the car with unusual enthusiasm. "Mom, are you ready?" She looked me up and down, as if assessing whether I looked presentable enough for their elite spa. "Let me help you with your bag." "I can carry my own bag, thank you," I replied, but Baxter had already snatched it from my hands. "Don't worry, Agatha," he said, with the fake warmth he always put on when he wanted something from me. "You're our guest of honor today." In the car, I noticed a bulky folder with documents on the back seat. "What's that?" I asked, nodding toward the folder. Willow and Baxter exchanged quick glances. "Just some work papers," Baxter replied, putting the folder in the side pocket of the door. "Nothing interesting." The drive took about 40 minutes. We left Oakland and climbed into the hills on a winding road surrounded by pine and eucalyptus trees. Willow talked nonstop about how much I would like Sunny Valley, what wonderful treatments and food they had there. "They even have a meditation garden," she chirped, "and daily yoga classes specifically for people your age." "My age?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean physically active, highly educated, and clear-minded?" Baxter snorted, but Willow ignored my sarcasm. When we turned off the main road onto a long avenue lined with plane trees, I saw Sun Valley for the first time. It was a large 3-story red brick building surrounded by manicured lawns. In front of the main entrance was a round flower bed with a fountain in the middle. Everything looked quite presentable, but for some reason, it resembled a sanatorium more than a luxury spa hotel. At the entrance, we were greeted by a middle-aged woman in a strict suit with a badge that read Director Elaine Foster. "Welcome to Sunny Valley!" She smiled a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Mrs. Thorndyke?" "Professor Thorndyke," I corrected her. It was an old habit I had no intention of giving up. "Of course, Professor," she nodded, without batting an eye. "We are very pleased to welcome you to our institution." The word institution caught my attention. Who calls a spa hotel an institution? We walked into a spacious lobby with marble floors and a reception desk that looked more like a hospital waiting room than a hotel reception. There were no fancy vases of flowers, no soft sofas, no bar, just a row of plastic chairs along the wall and a few glass cabinets with brochures. "Please have a seat." Director Foster pointed to one of the chairs. "We need to fill out some paperwork." I sat down, and Willow and Baxter followed the director to the counter, where they began to talk quietly about something, occasionally glancing in my direction. Baxter took the folder with the documents out of the car, and they began signing something. There were several other people in the lobby, all elderly, some with canes or in wheelchairs. A woman about my age with neatly styled gray hair sat across from me, leafing through a worn magazine. "First day?" she asked, noticing my gaze. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here for the weekend." The woman smiled strangely, but said nothing, just shook her head and returned to her magazine. 10 minutes later, Willow and Baxter approached me, accompanied by the director and another woman in a white coat with a badge that read Head Nurse Rebecca Klein. "Mom, all the formalities have been taken care of," Willow said with a forced smile. "Mrs. Foster will show you to your room." "Huh, aren't you coming with me?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of unease. "Baxter and I have an important meeting today," Willow said, avoiding my gaze. "We'll come by on Sunday evening to pick you up." "But I thought we would at least have dinner together." I began to realize that something was wrong. "And show me around." Unfortunately, we really have to go. Baxter glanced at his watch. But don't worry, the staff will show you everything. Willow quickly hugged me, smelling of nervousness and guilt. Have a good rest, Mom, she said, and practically dragged Baxter to the exit. I watched them go, and a chill ran down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. Professor Thorndyke. Director Foster's voice brought me back to reality. Let me show you to your room. Nurse Klein will help you with your things. We took the elevator to the second floor and walked down a long corridor lined with identical doors, numbered like in a hotel. The director stopped at door number 26 and opened it with an electronic key card. The room was small and functional. A single bed, a bedside table, a wardrobe, a table and chair, and a small TV on the wall. The bathroom was tiny, with handrails near the toilet and in the shower. It was nothing like the luxurious spa room Willow had described. This is the spa room? I couldn't hide my disappointment. This is a standard room for our residents, Director Foster replied, fully equipped with everything necessary for your comfort and safety. Residents? I felt my heart begin to beat faster. I thought this was a spa hotel. Director Foster and Nurse Klein exchanged glances. Sunny Valley is a long-term care facility for the elderly, the director said slowly. Didn't your daughter and son-in-law explain that to you? Long-term care? I felt the blood drain from my face. You mean a nursing home? We prefer the term active longevity facility, the director corrected me, with a professional smile. Everything here is designed to ensure a comfortable life for people in their golden years. The room spun before my eyes. They had tricked me. They had lured me to a nursing home under the pretext of a spa weekend, and they ran away without letting me know where I was. This is some kind of mistake. I clutched the handle of my bag. I'm not going to stay here. I want to call my daughter. I reached for my pocket where my phone was, but Nurse Klein gently stopped my hand. Professor Thorndyke, according to our facility's rules, cell phones are kept by the staff, she said. This is for the safety of our residents. Many forget to charge their phones or lose them. I'm not going to give you my phone. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. And I'm not your resident. There must be some mistake. All the paperwork is in order, Director Foster said, pulling several sheets of paper from a folder. Your daughter and son-in-law provided medical reports and signed all the necessary forms. You are registered as a permanent resident of Sunny Valley. That's impossible! I felt panic rising in my throat. I didn't give my consent. I want to call a taxi and go home. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Director Foster said, in that special tone used with difficult children. By law, if family members provide medical reports stating the need for constant supervision. What medical reports? I interrupted. I'm completely healthy and capable. We have a report of early-stage dementia signed by Dr. Richardson. The director showed me a sheet of paper with a stamp on it. And a social worker's assessment of your inability to live independently. It's a forgery! I snatched the paper from her hands. I've never been to Dr. Richardson. Professor Thorndyke, please calm down. Nurse Klein put her hand on my shoulder. Your agitation only confirms the diagnosis. Let me help you unpack your things, and then I'll take you to the dining room. Lunch will be ready soon. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. Hysteria won't help. I need to think clearly and find a way out of this situation. All right, I said, feigning humility. I understand. Can I have some time to get used to my new surroundings? Of course, Director Foster nodded, clearly pleased with my capitulation. Nurse Klein will be back in half an hour to take you to the dining room. In the meantime, I need to take your phone and house keys. They will be kept in the administration safe. I reluctantly handed over my phone and keys. feeling as if I were cutting off my last connection to the outside world. When they left, I sank down onto the hard bed and, for the first time in many years, felt the urge to cry. But instead of tears, cold rage came over me. How dare they? My own child, my flesh and blood, had orchestrated this betrayal. Standing up, I began to methodically search the room. The window overlooked a courtyard with a garden, but it didn't open fully, only a narrow slit for ventilation. The door was obviously locked from the outside with an electronic key. There was nothing in the bathroom that could be used as a weapon or tool. Even the mirror was made of shatterproof plastic. I unpacked my bag, placed Henry's photo on the nightstand, and sat down at the table to think about the situation. My phone and keys had been taken away. I didn't know Edmund's number by heart. It was stored in my phone. There was probably a communal phone for residents at Sunny Valley, but calls were most likely monitored. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and Nurse Klein entered. "Ready for lunch, Professor Thorndyke?" she asked with a professional smile. "Yes, of course," I tried to smile back. "And please, call me Agatha." On the way to the dining room, the nurse showed me around the facility. A common room with a TV and bookshelves, an activity room with board games and puzzles, a small library, and access to the garden. "We have a wonderful program of activities," she said. "Morning exercises, creative activities, movie nights, sometimes musicians come." I nodded, pretending to listen, while carefully studying my surroundings. The building was modern, with electronic locks on all doors. A security guard sat at the main entrance, watching the surveillance cameras. The windows on the first floor were equipped with sensors, and the doors leading outside could only be opened with a key card. The dining room was a large room with several long tables. Most of the seats were already occupied by elderly people of varying degrees of activity and awareness. Some were chatting animatedly, others were staring silently into space, and still others needed the staff's help to eat. "You can sit here." Nurse Klein pointed to a free seat at a table where 3 other women were sitting. "Meet Eleanor, Dorothy, and Virginia. They're new here too, just like you." I sat down and nodded to my table mates. Eleanor, a heavy-set woman with short gray hair, seemed slightly confused. Dorothy, thin and fit, with bright lipstick on her wrinkled lips, looked angry. Virginia, with her elegant posture and piercing eyes, watched me with interest. "Another voluntary patient?" Dorothy asked bitterly when the nurse left. "Let me guess. Your children said it's temporary until you recover from your illness." "A spa hotel for the weekend," I replied, putting tasteless mashed potatoes on my plate. "A creative approach," Virginia snorted. "My sister-in-law said they're putting me in for a 3-day examination." That was 2 months ago. "How long have you been here?" I asked Dorothy. 4 months, she pursed her lips. My son suddenly decided I couldn't live alone after I slipped on the stairs and sprained my ankle. The truth is, he wanted my house for his new wife and her children. "You're all so negative," Eleanor interjected, her voice trembling. "Sunny Valley is a good place. They take care of us here." "I can't remember the last time I ate so well," Dorothy rolled her eyes. "Eleanor thinks she's in a 5-star hotel? But at least she's happy." After lunch, we were invited to an adaptation session in the activity room. An elderly man in a tweed jacket introduced himself as Dr. Howard, the facility's psychologist. "I understand that adjusting to a new home can be difficult," he began in a sweet voice, "but Sunny Valley is designed for your comfort and safety. Here, you don't have to worry about everyday problems such as cooking, cleaning, or paying bills. You can enjoy your well-deserved rest." I sat in a circle with other newcomers and listened to this propaganda, feeling resistance growing inside me. This is not a rest, it's a prison. After the class, We were taken to the common room for free time. I noticed a phone on the wall in the corner, obviously shared by the residents. "Can I call my daughter?" I asked the nurse on duty in the living room. "Of course," he smiled. "But calls are only possible during communication hours, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, and they must be pre-approved by the administration." "What time is it now?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. 4:30, he replied. "You can sign up for a call tomorrow." I nodded and walked away, realizing that there was no direct way out. I would have to find a detour. In the living room, I noticed the same elderly man in a tweed jacket, Dr. Howard, who was now playing chess with one of the residents. Next to them sat another man, about my age, with a bushy gray mustache and attentive eyes. He watched the game with a slight smile. "Checkmate in 3 moves," he said quietly as I walked by. I stopped and looked at the board. Indeed, the position was losing for one of the players. "Do you play?" the man asked, noticing my interest. "Sometimes," I replied. My husband was an avid chess player. "Have a seat," he said, pointing to a free chair next to him. "My name is Rupert Hanover, a former math teacher. Agatha Thorndike, former literature teacher." I sat down next to him. "Ah, a colleague." He smiled more broadly. "How long have you been in our little hell?" "Since today," I replied quietly. "And you?" "A year already," he sighed. "My son decided that after my stroke, I needed constant care." The stroke was mild. I made a full recovery, but— He spread his arms. "The house turned out to be more important than the father." We were silent, watching the game. Dr. Howard was losing, and his face was becoming increasingly tense. "Is there a way to contact the outside world here?" I asked very quietly, without looking at Rupert. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. "Everything is controlled. Phones, mail, visitors. But—" He paused. "There are certain opportunities. For those who are smart and patient enough." The chess game ended in defeat for Dr. Howard, and he stood up, smiling tensely. "Good game, Mr. Jenkins," he said, nodding to us and leaving. "Did he hear us?" I asked Rupert when the doctor was gone. "Hardly, but it's always better to be careful here," replied Rupert. "If you really want to get out of here, come to the library tomorrow at 11. I usually read the newspapers there." Our conversation was interrupted when Nurse Klein entered the living room and announced that it was time to get ready for dinner. The evening at Sunny Valley was scheduled down to the minute. Dinner, evening checkup, medication, which I refused, saying I had no chronic illnesses, watching a movie in the common room, and lights out at 9. When I returned to my room, another unpleasant surprise awaited me. My bag had been thoroughly searched, my things rearranged, and my book was gone. "Where's my book?" I asked the nurse who came to check if I was in bed. "What book?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Muriel Spark, The Ballad of Pokham Ray. It was in my bag." "Ah!" The nurse nodded. "All books must be checked by the librarian for appropriate content. You can choose something from the library tomorrow." When she left, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling and replaying the events of the day in my head. My family had betrayed me, locked me up in this place, obviously to take possession of my house. I was cut off from the outside world, with no phone, no way to contact my friends, but they didn't take one thing into account. I wasn't going to give up. Tomorrow at 11, I would meet Rupert in the library and find out what options there were. And whatever it took, I would get out of here and make them answer for what they had done. I looked at Henry's photo on the nightstand and whispered, "They think they can lock me up here and forget about me. But they're very much mistaken." The night at Sunny Valley was unbearably long. The narrow bed with its hard mattress, the noise of equipment from the next room, and the muffled moans of one of the residents kept me awake. Thoughts swarmed in my head. How could my own children do this to me? What did they tell my friends and neighbors? What is happening in my house right now? I got up at dawn, again at 6:30, out of long-standing habit. The room was cold, despite it being the middle of spring. Apparently, the administration was saving on heating. I put on my own clothes, refusing the gray hospital gowns that were offered to all the residents. It was a small act of resistance, but it helped me maintain my sense of dignity. At 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door, and a young nurse entered with a tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Thorndyke," she said, placing the tray on the table. "I'm Lucy, the day nurse for this wing. I brought you breakfast." "Professor Thorndyke," I corrected automatically, looking at the dreary oatmeal and glass of orange juice that looked as if it had been diluted with water in a ratio of 1 to 3. "And I prefer to have breakfast in the dining room with the other residents." Lucy hesitated. "Actually, new residents are usually advised to have breakfast in their rooms for the first few days while they get used to the routine of the institution." I'm not going to get used to the routine of this institution," I replied, picking up my purse, "because I don't plan on staying here." "Now, could you show me the way to the dining room?" To my surprise, Lucy didn't argue, just nodded and led me down the hallway. On the way, she said quietly, "You know, I understand how you feel. My grandmother ended up here too, not entirely of her own free will." I looked at her closely. Lucy was young, no more than 25, with kind eyes and a sincere smile, a rarity among the staff at Sunny Valley. "Is your grandmother still here?" I asked cautiously. "No." Lucy shook her head. "She left us last year, but I stayed on to work. Someone has to take care of the people whose families have simply put them aside." There was bitterness in her voice, and I realized that I could find an ally in her. In the dining room, I sat down again with Dorothy and Virginia. Eleanor was not there. "Morning procedures," Dorothy explained, noticing my glance. "They found she had high blood pressure, and now they're pumping her full of drugs." "It's standard procedure," Virginia added, stirring her colorless tea. "Find or invent a health problem, prescribe a bunch of drugs, and then use the side effects as proof that you really need constant care." Breakfast was as tasteless as the food the night before. I barely touched the oversalted scrambled eggs and rubbery toast. All I could think about was meeting Rupert in the library at 11. After breakfast, we were invited to participate in morning activities, which were a cross between kindergarten and occupational therapy. Gray-haired men and women, many of whom had decades of professional careers behind them, were now coloring pictures of kittens and gluing colored paper cards. "It's for fine motor skills," the instructor explained in a deliberately cheerful voice. "And for a positive mood." I declined to participate, citing arthritis, which I didn't have, and instead watched the residents. Most of them seemed resigned. Some even seemed content, like Eleanor, who was enthusiastically coloring a paper butterfly. But there were others, like Dorothy and Virginia, whose eyes remained clear and determined. I knew I had to stay close to them. At 11, I went to the library, a small room with a few bookcases containing mostly outdated encyclopedias, cheap detective stories, and large print romance novels. Rupert was already there, sitting in the corner with a newspaper, as he had promised. "Ah, Professor Thorndyke," he said loudly enough for the elderly librarian to hear. "I'm glad you've joined me." "I'm just reading about the latest developments in the world of culture." I sat down next to him, and he discreetly slid a folded note toward me. I took it just as discreetly and hid it in my sleeve. "What interesting things are they writing about?" I asked, maintaining the appearance of normal conversation. "Oh, Oh, the usual news. He turned the page. By the way, I noticed you didn't participate in this morning's activity. You're right not to. It's for those who have already given up. We continued to chat about trivialities until the librarian left to make her rounds. As soon as the door closed behind her, Rupert leaned toward me. We don't have much time. There are a few people here who can help. Lucy, the nurse on the day shift, her grandmother was here. Sam, the guy from the maintenance crew, he brings in the food and takes out the trash, and he has access to the service entrance. And Manuela, the cleaner, she's an immigrant, doesn't speak English very well, but she understands what's going on here and hates this place. Thanks, I nodded. But how can they help me get out? Not so fast, Rupert shook his head. First, we need to gather information and contact someone outside. Do you have a lawyer or friend who can help? Edmund Chaffinch, I replied. An old friend and experienced lawyer. But I don't know his number by heart. It was in my phone. That's a problem, Rupert frowned. All calls are monitored, and even if you knew the number, they wouldn't just connect you to a lawyer. At that moment, the door opened, and Lucy, the nurse who had brought me breakfast, entered the library. Sorry to interrupt, she said with a smile. Mr. Hanover, it's time to take your medication. And Professor Thorndyke, you are requested to come to the medical office for an initial examination. On the way to the medical office, Lucy said quietly, Rupert said you want to contact a lawyer friend. I can help, but how? I asked, looking back to make sure no one could hear us. I'm on duty alone in the medical office today. There's a phone there, she said quickly and quietly. Come in half an hour and say you have a headache. I'll give you a chance to make the call, but we'll have no more than 5 minutes. In the medical office, Lucy did indeed conduct a standard examination. She measured my blood pressure and temperature and asked the usual questions about my health. But when we were alone, she suddenly asked, is your daughter Willow Thorndyke Price, a real estate agent with Prestige Realty? Yes. I looked at her in surprise. How do you know? Lucy took a folded page from a newspaper out of her pocket and handed it to me. I saw this ad in the Oakland Herald yesterday. I unfolded the page and felt the blood drain from my face. It was an advertisement for the sale of a house, my house. Magnificent Victorian mansion in a prestigious Oakland neighborhood. The text read, First time on the market in 60 years. Original details, tremendous potential for renovation. Viewings by appointment only, and below. Real estate agent, Willow Thorndyke Price. It can't be, I whispered. I've only been here one day, and they've already... The ad was posted 3 days ago, Lucy said quietly, before you were brought here. I sat there, stunned by the betrayal. They had planned it all in advance. The spa hotel, the sudden concern. It was all part of a plan to get rid of me and take over my house. I'm sorry, Lucy said, putting her hand on my shoulder. I understand how you feel. The same realtor sold my grandmother's house when she came here. Willow? I looked at her, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. Yes, Lucy nodded. Your daughter specializes in this kind of real estate. Real estate for elderly people who suddenly find themselves in long-term care facilities. So that's it. My own daughter used her elderly clients to earn commissions from the sale of their homes, and now it was my own mother's turn. I need to contact Edmund urgently, I said firmly. Do you have a phone book? There's one in the administrative office, but it's hard to get to, Lucy replied. Maybe you remember his address? We can try to find the number online. Auckland University, Law School, I said. He taught there until he retired 5 years ago. He should be listed as an honorary professor. Lucy nodded and quickly wrote down the information. I'll find his number. Come back here in 2 hours during lunch break. Tell them you need headache medicine. 2 hours seemed like an eternity. I returned to the common room, where Virginia was sitting, reading a well-worn Agatha Christie novel. "How did the medical exam go?" she asked, without looking up from her book. "Standard," I replied, sitting down next to her. "But I found out something important. My daughter has already put my house up for sale." Virginia put down her book. "They never waste any time, do they? My son sold my apartment before I was even brought here. He said the money would go toward paying for this wonderful facility." "And there was nothing you could do?" "The apartment was registered to both of us." Virginia smiled bitterly. "For my safety, as he said. What about you?" "The house is entirely mine," I replied. "I inherited it from my parents, and it's registered solely in my name. They need my signature to sell it legally. Then why have they already placed an advertisement?" That question made me think. Indeed, how were they going to sell the house without my consent? I hadn't signed any documents transferring ownership, but then I remembered the folder of documents that Baxter had taken from Director Foster's office. What if, among the papers they had signed, there was not only the contract for my placement in Sunny Valley, but also a power of attorney to dispose of my property? Or even worse, a forged power of attorney with a fake signature? Exactly 2 hours later, I was back in the medical office. Lucy quickly closed the door and took a piece of paper with a phone number out of her robe pocket. "I found him," she said. "Edmund Chaffinch, Professor Emeritus of Law at the University of Auckland. We have 5 minutes, no more. Director Foster is having lunch in her office and never leaves during that time." She dialed the number and handed me the phone. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I began to fear that Edmund wouldn't answer or that the number was wrong. But on the 4th ring, I heard his deep, familiar voice. "Edmund Chaffinch speaking." "Edmund, it's Agatha," I said quickly. "I don't have much time. I've been tricked into coming to the Sunny Valley nursing home. Willow and Baxter said they were taking me to a spa for the weekend, but they brought me here instead and have already put my house up for sale." "Agatha!" His voice sounded surprised. "I got your message, but I thought you were really at the spa. My God, that's awful. Are you okay?" "Physically, yes, but they took my phone and keys and forbade me to call. I'm calling secretly. I only have a couple of minutes." "Where exactly is this Sunny Valley?" Edmund's voice became businesslike. I knew that tone. It was how he spoke when he took on a difficult case. "Somewhere in the hills outside Oakland. I don't remember the exact road." "It's a closed facility, with security guards and electronic locks. They have some papers, supposedly medical reports about my incapacity, but they're fake. I've never been to these doctors." "Don't worry, Agatha," Edmund said firmly. "I'll get you out of there." Unfortunately, cases like this are not uncommon. I need a little time to prepare the documents and go to court to get an order for your release. Can you hold out for a few days?" "I'll have to," I replied. "But Edmund, what about my house? They've already put it up for sale." "They can't legally sell the house without your signature," Edmund assured me. "Unless—" "Agatha, have you signed any documents recently? Powers of attorney, medical forms, anything like that?" "No, nothing. I was sure of that. They tried to get me to sign some papers about more efficient property management, but I refused." "Good, that's good." Edmund's voice sounded relieved. "Then they're acting illegally, and we can stop them. But I need access to your house to check what's going on there. Do you have spare keys somewhere or someone you trust?" "Harold Pettigrew, my neighbor," I said quickly. "He has a spare key for emergencies. And Octavia, my granddaughter, I trust her too." "Octavia? Willow's daughter?" Edmund's voice sounded doubtful. "Yes, but she's not like them. She's—" At that moment, Lucy waved her arms quickly. "Finish up, someone's coming!" "Edmund, I have to go," I said quickly. "Contact Octavia Price. She's an art college student." "And Harold." He knows I didn't plan on leaving for long. I'll find them, Agatha, I promise. And I'll get you out of there, Edmund said firmly. Hang in there. Lucy took the phone from me and quickly put it on the hook, just as the door opened and Nurse Klein peeked into the office. Lucy? She looked at us suspiciously. What's going on here? Professor Thorndyke has a migraine, Lucy replied calmly, taking a packet of pills out of the cabinet. I'm just giving her some painkillers. A migraine? Nurse Klein looked at me doubtfully. There's no mention of migraines in her file. This is the first time since I've been here, I said, putting my hand to my forehead and pretending to be in pain. Probably the stress of moving. Nurse Klein still looked suspicious. Well, Lucy, when you're done here, come see me in my office. We need to discuss your schedule for next week. When she left, Lucy breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. Nurse Klein is Director Foster's right-hand woman. She keeps a close eye on the staff. Thank you, I said, shaking her hand sincerely. You're risking your job by helping me. It's worth it, Lucy said firmly. After what happened to my grandmother, I can't just stand by and watch it happen again and again. I returned to my room, feeling that the ice had broken. Edmund knew about my situation and was taking action. Now I just had to hold out for a few days and not let the Sun Valley administration suspect anything. As I was thinking about my next steps, there was a knock at my door, and Sam, the young guy from the service staff that Rupert had mentioned, came in. Excuse me, ma'am, he said loudly, clearly for my benefit. I'm here to collect the breakfast tray. He walked over to the table, where the tray with the untouched oatmeal was still standing, and leaned over and whispered, Lucy said you were able to contact a lawyer. That's good. I can pass a note or a small item outside if you need me to. Thank you, I replied just as quietly. I don't need anything right now, but I'll keep that in mind. Sam nodded, straightened up, picked up the tray, and headed for the door. As he was leaving, he added, One more thing, ma'am. I saw your daughter this morning. She came with a man in a suit, and they spoke with Director Foster. A man in a suit? I asked. Not my son-in-law? No, ma'am, I know Mr. Price by sight. It was someone else, with a briefcase, like a lawyer or a banker. After Sam left, I sat on the bed, trying to figure out what was going on. Willow had come here with some kind of business person, possibly a real estate agent or a notary. Why? What were they up to? Meanwhile, my family home in Oakland was a hive of activity. Willow Thorndyke Price stood in the middle of the living room, giving instructions to two young people who were taking books off the shelves and packing them into cardboard boxes. It's all for charity, she said. No one needs old books, but the college library has agreed to accept them as a donation. Imagine how happy Mom will be when she finds out that her collection has found a good use. Baxter Price sat at an antique desk, sorting through documents. Willow, are you sure the notary did everything correctly? He asked, looking through some papers. Without your mother's signature, it all looks questionable. Don't worry. Willow waved him off. Dr. Richardson confirmed early-stage dementia, and the social worker assessed her condition as inability to make financial decisions. By law, in such cases, the closest relative has the right to act on behalf of the incapacitated person. But your mother is perfectly lucid, Baxter objected. Anyone who talks to her for 5 minutes will understand that. That's exactly why she's at Sunny Valley and not at home. Willow lowered her voice, even though the only people in the room were them and the workers, who were unlikely to be listening to their conversation. Dr. Foster promised that Mom wouldn't have any contact with outsiders in the coming weeks. In a month, the house will be sold, the money will be transferred to the account, and we'll be able to move her to a more economical facility. Baxter shook his head. I don't like any of this, Willow. It's one thing to convince an elderly person to move to more suitable housing, but this is something else entirely. Enough sentimentality, Willow replied sharply. You yourself said that we need money to pay off the debts from your last brilliant business idea. This house is worth at least $2 million, especially after the renovation. Do you want to continue living with debts and constant calls from debt collectors? At that moment, a tall young man with a tablet in his hands entered the room. Lawrence Price, their son and my grandson. The realtor called, he said, without looking up from the screen. The first potential buyers are coming tomorrow. He says we need to remove all personal items and photos immediately. The house needs to look neutral. So soon! Baxter was surprised. We haven't even started renovating yet. They want to see the before condition to assess the potential, Lawrence explained. By the way, I called a couple of antique stores about the furniture. Some of the pieces could fetch a good price, especially the secretary desk and the dining room set. Excellent, son. Willow nodded approvingly. I always knew you had a knack for business. The doorbell rang, and Baxter went to answer it. A minute later, he returned accompanied by a young woman with long, dark hair pulled back in a casual bun. Octavia Price, my youngest granddaughter. What's going on here? She asked, looking around the ransacked living room with boxes of books and paintings removed from the walls. Where's Grandma? Your grandmother is at a lovely spa hotel, relaxing, Willow replied quickly. And we're just tidying up the house a bit. You know how she hates cleaning? Octavia raised her eyebrows. You're packing up all her books and taking down her paintings. That doesn't sound like cleaning. We're just clearing out some space, Lawrence interjected. Grandma's house is too cluttered. It's not clutter, it's her life, Octavia objected. And why didn't she tell me she was leaving? We were supposed to meet this week. It was a spontaneous decision. Willow put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Dad and I decided to surprise her. She'll be back on Monday, rested and refreshed. Octavia looked unconvinced. I want to call her. She doesn't have a phone, Baxter said quickly. Gadgets are not allowed at the spa. It's part of the detox program. Then give me the address. I'll go visit her, Octavia insisted. Honey, don't be selfish. Willow hugged her daughter's shoulders and led her to the kitchen. Grandma needs rest. You can see her on Monday. In the meantime, let's talk about your final exams. How is your preparation going? Octavia reluctantly followed her mother, but her face showed that she didn't believe a word. Lawrence watched them go with a slight smile. Octavia has always been Grandma's favorite. What will we do if she starts asking too many questions? Nothing, Baxter replied firmly. On Monday, we'll say that the spa hotel has extended your grandmother's program for another week, free of charge. And in a week, we'll come up with something else. By then, the contract for the sale of the house will already be signed. And then? Asked Lawrence. What will we say when Grandma doesn't come home? Baxter and Lawrence exchanged glances, and a heavy silence hung in the living room. The 3 days at Sunny Valley dragged on endlessly. I counted the hours, minutes, and seconds, waiting for news from Edmund. Every day followed the same dreary schedule. Wake up at 7, tasteless breakfast, meaningless activities, lunch, afternoon rest, actually forced bed rest, more activities, dinner, watching old movies in the common room, and lights out at 9, just like in a boarding school for troubled teens. I tried to keep quiet and not arouse suspicion. I talked to the other residents, especially Rupert, Dorothy, and Virginia, who became my allies. Lucy, a young nurse, found a moment every day to tell me that there was no news from Edmund, but she was still waiting for his call. On the 4th day of my confinement, during lunch break, Lucy literally flew into my room. Professor Thorndyke, your friend called. He's coming today at 4 o'clock with a court order. A court order? I felt my heart beat faster. Yes, he said he got an order for your immediate release. He proved that you're being held here illegally. Against your will, I couldn't believe it was really happening. After days of helplessness and uncertainty, there was finally hope. Lucy, you have no idea how grateful I am to you. I squeezed her hand. Without your help, I wouldn't have been able to contact Edmund. I'm glad I could help, she smiled. My grandmother didn't have that chance. But now I have to go so as not to arouse suspicion. Just be ready at 4 o'clock. And maybe pack your things in advance, but discreetly. After Lucy left, I carefully took out my bag and began to pack the few things I had brought with me. A photograph of Henry, my nightgown, my medication. Muriel Sparks' book was never returned to me. At 3:50 p.m., I was sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed and ready to leave, when there was a knock at the door. It was Lucy. "They're here," she whispered. "Your friend Edmund, the sheriff, and some other official. They're talking to Director Foster in her office right now. She's furious." "How do I get to them?" I asked, grabbing my bag. "I'll take you," Lucy replied. "Just don't rush and don't look too nervous. We're just going for a routine medical examination, if anyone asks." We walked down the hallway at a deliberately calm pace, even though I was trembling with excitement and fear inside. What if something went wrong? What if Edmund didn't have enough evidence? What if Principal Foster found a way to keep me here? As I passed Rupert's room, I saw him standing in the doorway. He silently gave me a thumbs up, and I nodded in response. Dorothy and Virginia watched from the common room, their eyes shining with a mixture of hope and envy. Principal Foster's office was located in the administrative wing of the building. When Lucy and I approached the door, loud voices could be heard coming from inside. "This is completely illegal," Director Foster protested. "We have all the necessary documents signed by Mrs. Thorndyke's daughter and confirmed by medical reports, which, as we have discovered, were obtained without examining the patient," replied a calm but firm voice that I immediately recognized as Edmund's. Dr. Richardson confirmed under oath that he never met Professor Thorndyke and did not assess her mental state. Moreover, the social worker who allegedly assessed her living conditions is not licensed and is a friend of the Price family. All of this falls under the article on fraud. Lucy knocked softly on the door, and the voices immediately fell silent. "Come in," Director Foster said sharply. Lucy opened the door, and I entered the office. There were 4 people there: Director Foster at her desk, Edmund in an impeccable suit, a man in a sheriff's uniform, and a middle-aged woman in a strict business suit with a social services badge. "Agatha!" Edmund rose to meet me, his face lit up with a smile of relief. "Thank God you're okay." "Edmund." I couldn't contain my emotions and hugged my old friend tightly. "I knew you would come." Director Foster looked at us with poorly concealed anger. "Professor Thorndyke, you are violating the rules of the institution. It's afternoon rest time, and you should be in your room. I'm afraid Professor Thorndyke is no longer required to comply with your institution's rules," the woman from Social Services interjected, handing Director Foster a document. "This is a court order for the immediate release of Agatha Thorndyke from your custody." It was signed by Judge Hammond this morning. Director Foster scanned the document, and her face turned pale. "But that's impossible. We have legal grounds for keeping Mrs. Thorndyke here." "Professor Thorndyke," I automatically corrected her. "These legal grounds were obtained fraudulently." Edmund placed another folder on the table. "Here are statements from real experts who assessed Professor Thorndyke's mental state this morning via video conference. The conclusion is unanimous. She is fully capable and does not need constant care. Also included are written statements from 3 of her neighbors refuting the claims that she cannot take care of herself. The sheriff, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "Director Foster, I advise you to cooperate. Otherwise, we will be forced to conduct a full investigation of your facility, including checking all residents for the legality of their stay here." This threat worked. Director Foster swallowed nervously and pressed a button on the phone. "Nurse Klein, please bring Professor Thorndyke's personal belongings from the safe." Immediately, a few minutes later, Nurse Klein appeared with my phone, keys, and the very book by Muriel Spark that had been confiscated from me on the first day. "Is that all?" Edmund asked, taking the items and handing them to me. I checked the contents of the bag. "Yes, I think that's everything." "Then we're leaving," Edmund announced. "And, Director Foster, I advise you not to try to contact Professor Thorndyke's family to warn them. It could be considered complicity in fraud." Director Foster said nothing, just stared at us with a look of helpless rage. When we left the office, Lucy was waiting for us in the hallway. "So, is everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I smiled at her. "Thanks to you." "I'm so happy for you." She hugged me quickly. "Good luck." And, "Give them what they deserve. We will," I promised. On the way out, I stopped at Rupert's room to say goodbye. The old mathematician shook my hand and said quietly, "You give us all hope, Professor. Don't forget us when you're free." "I never will," I replied. "I'll come back for you, Rupert." And for the rest of you, Dorothy and Virginia also came out to say goodbye. I hugged them both, feeling tears welling up in my eyes, not from my own happiness, but from the thought that I was leaving them here, in this elegantly disguised prison. Finally, Edmund and I went outside, where his car was waiting for us, an old but immaculately maintained Jaguar. The sheriff and the social worker got into a separate car and drove away, waving goodbye. "I can't believe I'm really free," I said, sitting in the front seat next to Edmund. "These 4 days seemed like an eternity." It could have been worse," Edmund remarked grimly as he pulled onto the road. "If you hadn't been able to contact me." I've seen cases where elderly people have been held in places like this for years, completely cut off from the outside world. "How did you manage to arrange everything so quickly?" I asked, breathing in the scent of freedom with relish, the fresh air rushing in through the car window, which was slightly open. "Right after your call, I contacted Harold Pettigrew, your neighbor," Edmund began. "He confirmed that you left suddenly without warning him, which is very unlike you. Then I found Octavia through social media. That girl is a real treasure, Agatha. She immediately sensed that something was wrong when she saw her parents emptying your house." "They're emptying my house?" I felt anger boiling up inside me. "Yes, and very actively," Edmund nodded. "They've already taken some of the furniture, books, and paintings." Octavia took photos and videos of the whole process. Excellent evidence for the court. She also found draft documents about the sale of the house that her mother left on the kitchen table. There was also a forged power of attorney with your supposed signature. "It's a forgery," I hissed. "Willow always loved to copy my signature, ever since school, when she used to forge notes to teachers." With the evidence Octavia gathered, the testimony of Harold and other neighbors, and the medical examination I arranged via video conference with my friend, a gerontologist, we were able to convince Judge Hammond to issue an order for your immediate release. The judge was furious when he learned about the circumstances of the case. He knows you personally from university circles and couldn't believe that you were suffering from dementia. I sat there, stunned by the extent of my family's betrayal, and at the same time deeply moved by Edmund's efforts to rescue me. "What about Sunshine Valley?" I asked. "They broke the law by keeping me there against my will." "Yes, and they will be held accountable," Edmund confirmed. The sheriff is launching a full investigation into their activities. Your case is most likely not the only one. Lucy, the nurse who helped you, has agreed to testify about similar cases in the past. She risked her job for me, I said quietly. I have to thank her somehow. We'll think of something. Edmund smiled. For now, let's focus on getting your house back and holding your family accountable. The drive to Oakland took about an hour. We rode mostly in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I looked out the window at the passing scenery, hills, fields, suburbs, and couldn't believe that just this morning I thought I might never see it again. When we pulled up to my house, my breath caught in my throat. Baxter's SUV was parked in the driveway, and next to it was a truck with the logo of an antique store. Two men were carrying my favorite secretary desk, which I had inherited from my grandmother, out of the house. They're selling off my furniture, I whispered, feeling my hands clench into fists. Not anymore, Edmund said firmly, stopping the car right behind the truck, blocking its exit. Come on, let's show them that Grandma is back. We got out of the car and headed for the house. The movers froze with the secretary desk in their hands when they saw us. Put that back in the house, immediately, I said, in the tone I usually use to quiet an audience of unruly freshmen. This furniture is not for sale. But ma'am, we have an order from Mrs. Price. One of them began. Mrs. Price has no right to dispose of this property, Edmund interjected, taking a business card out of his pocket. Edmund Chaffinch, attorney. And this is Professor Agatha Thorndike, the legal owner of this house and all its contents. If you don't want to be charged with aiding and abetting theft, I advise you to return the secretary to where you took it from and leave. The movers exchanged glances, then turned around and carried the secretary back into the house. We followed them. Inside my house, chaos reigned. Boxes of books and personal belongings were piled up in the hallway. Light rectangles remained on the walls where paintings had once hung. Furniture had been moved, and some was missing. I felt a wave of rage rising within me. Voices came from the living room. Edmund and I quietly approached and stopped in the doorway, watching the scene. Willow was talking on the phone, Baxter was calculating something on a calculator, and Lawrence was sitting on the sofa, looking through a furniture store catalog. Yes, we'll have the house completely vacated by the end of the week, Willow said into the phone. The showing on Saturday? Great. I'll get all the paperwork ready. Yes, of course. Everything is legal. I have power of attorney from my mother. You don't have any power of attorney, Willow, I said loudly, taking a step forward. The effect was stunning. Willow dropped her phone. Baxter jumped so high that his calculator flew to the floor, and Lawrence made a strange squeaking sound. Mom? Willow looked at me as if she had seen a ghost. But, you're in Sunny Valley. I was in Sunny Valley, I corrected, entering the room, where you deceitfully placed me, saying it was a spa hotel, where you took my phone and keys, where I just got out of with a court order. Baxter tried to pull himself together. Agatha, you don't understand. It's all for your own good. You can't live alone in such a big house. Enough, Baxter, I interrupted him. I understand perfectly well. You wanted to get rid of me so you could sell my house and pocket the money. You forged medical reports, lied to my friends and neighbors, stole my things. We didn't steal, Willow protested. We were just clearing space for potential buyers, I finished for her. I know about the listing you put up before you took me to Sunny Valley. I know about the fake power of attorney with the forged signature. I know everything, Willow. How did you? Lawrence began, but fell silent when Octavia entered the room. Grandma! She rushed over to me and hugged me tightly. I'm so glad you're back. I knew something was wrong when they started taking your things away. Octavia? Willow looked at her daughter with horror. You You helped her? Of course I did. Octavia stood up proudly. Unlike you, I love Grandma and respect her right to live the way she wants. Traitor! Lawrence hissed. No, Lawrence, I shook my head. You are the traitors here. You betrayed my trust, my love, everything I tried to teach you. A heavy silence hung in the room. Willow was the first to try to go on the offensive. Mom, you've got it all wrong. We were genuinely concerned about you. You're becoming forgetful. You live alone in a huge house that requires constant maintenance. Stop lying, Willow, I said wearily. We have proof of everything. The fake medical reports, the forged power of attorney, the illegal sale of my belongings. Edmund has already prepared the lawsuit. Lawsuit? Baxter turned pale. You're going to sue us? That's right, Edmund confirmed, stepping forward. For fraud, forgery, attempted unlawful imprisonment, and attempted misappropriation of property. You can't sue your own family, Willow exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine indignation, as if I were an ungrateful daughter rather than a victim of their machinations. I can and I will, I replied firmly. And for your information, I've already spoken to Harold Pettigrew and other neighbors. They confirmed that I am fully capable and perfectly capable of taking care of the house. Now I ask you all to leave my house. Immediately. But where will we go? Lawrence asked, confused. To your own homes, I replied. The ones you still haven't paid off, if I understand correctly. Baxter opened his mouth to say something, but Willow grabbed his arm. Let's go, Baxter. There's no point in arguing when she's in this mood. You're right, he agreed. Agatha, we're leaving. But this conversation isn't over. Oh, it's over, I assured them. And by the way, I'm changing the locks today. Your keys won't work anymore. Willow gave me one last look, full of a mixture of anger and fear, then turned to Lawrence. Pack your things. We're leaving. They left the house in less than 10 minutes, taking only their personal belongings that were in the house. As soon as the door closed behind them, I sank into my chair, suddenly feeling weak in the knees. Are you okay? Edmund asked, sitting down next to me. Yes, it was harder than I expected, I admitted. No matter how angry I am at them, they're still my family. Grandma! Octavia sat on the arm of my chair. You did the right thing. What they did is unforgivable. Thank you, dear. I took her hand. And thank you for your help. Without you and Edmund, I would still be in that awful place. I just couldn't believe that Mom and Dad were capable of doing that. Octavia shook her head. When I saw them taking your things out and talking about selling the house, I knew something was wrong. And then I found those documents in the kitchen. You did a very brave thing, Octavia, Edmund said. Not everyone would dare to go against their own parents, even if they're wrong. I just did what I thought was right. She shrugged, then looked at me with concern. What will happen now, Grandma? Are you really going to sue them? I sighed. I have to do this, Octavia, not just for myself, but for other elderly people who may fall victim to similar schemes. Your mother specializes in selling the homes of elderly people who are placed in long-term care facilities. How many other cases like this were there before me? I understand, Octavia said quietly. It's difficult. I know, dear. I stroked her arm. And I'm not asking you to take sides. You can love your parents and disapprove of their actions at the same time. Edmund stood up. I'll call a locksmith to come and change the locks as soon as possible. And then, if you don't mind, Agatha, I'd like to stay for dinner. We need to discuss what to do next. Of course, I smiled at him. You're always welcome in my home, Edmund. While Edmund was on the phone, Octavia and I began to tidy up the living room, putting back the things that were still in the house. Ah, a lot has already been taken away, Octavia said regretfully, looking at the empty spaces where the furniture had once stood. Dad sold some of the antique furniture, and Mom gave many of your books to a charity shop. We'll get back everything we can, I said, trying to sound confident, even though my heart ached at the sight of the empty house. And what we can't get back, we'll replace with new things. The main thing is that I'm home again. Octavia hugged me. I'm so happy about this, Grandma. I was afraid I would never see you again. But you didn't give up. I kissed her on the forehead. And for that, I will be forever grateful. An hour later, a locksmith arrived and began changing the locks on all the doors. Edmund watched the process, occasionally giving instructions on where to install additional security mechanisms. We'll also install a modern security system, he said, with cameras and motion sensors. Just in case, do you think they might try to come back? I asked anxiously. I don't think they'll risk doing anything illegal after we threaten them with legal action, Edmund replied. But it's better to be safe than sorry. By the time the locksmith had finished his work, it was already getting dark. Octavia volunteered to make dinner, while Edmund and I sat in the living room discussing the next steps. I'll file a lawsuit on your behalf tomorrow, he said, but I would also like you to file a report with the police for fraud and attempted misappropriation of property. Do you really think we should pursue criminal charges? I asked, still hesitant at the thought of my daughter going to jail. This is a serious crime, Agatha, Edmund said gently. They didn't just try to sell your house. They deprived you of your freedom and put your health and well-being at risk. And from what Lucy told me, your daughter has done this repeatedly to other elderly people. I thought about Rupert, Dorothy, Virginia, and dozens of other elderly people still locked up in Sunny Valley, and my resolve strengthened. You're right, Edmund. We'll file a report with the police, and I want the investigation to cover all cases involving Willow and Sunny Valley. It will, he nodded. For now, let's focus on getting your property back and ensuring your safety. I looked around. My house was battered and partially ransacked, but it was still mine. I was free again, within my own walls, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. You know, I said to Edmund, despite all this, I feel like a winner. They thought they could just lock me up and forget about me, but they were sorely mistaken. Edmund smiled and raised an imaginary glass. To Agatha Thorndyke, who never gives up. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of legal activity. Edmund, at 78, worked with the energy of a young lawyer just starting his career. He arrived every morning with new documents, advice, and plans of action. My dining room was transformed into a makeshift office, littered with folders, legal reference books, and cups of half-drunk tea. We're filing 3 separate lawsuits, Edmund explained, arranging the folders on the dining room table. The first is against Sunny Valley for unlawful detention and mistreatment. The second is against Dr. Richardson for falsifying medical reports. And the third, the most important, is against Willow and Baxter for fraud, document forgery, and emotional abuse. Are you sure we'll win? I asked, leafing through the documents he had prepared. They're bound to have good lawyers. More than sure. Edmund smiled, with the kind of confidence that only comes after decades of successful practice. We have all the necessary evidence, witness statements, a medical report confirming your full legal capacity, photos and videos taken by Octavia, forged documents with a fake signature. It's a clear victory. Agatha Octavia had become my constant companion these days. After confronting her parents, she decided to move in with me temporarily, taking her old room on the second floor. I can't stay under the same roof with them, Grandma, she explained when she brought her things over. Not after what they did. They didn't even apologize, you know? They just say they acted in your best interests and that I don't understand adult decisions. They will face the consequences of their adult decisions very soon, I assured her, as I helped her unpack her suitcases. My first visit after returning home was to Sunny Valley, but this time on my terms, accompanied by Edmund and a social worker. I had promised Rupert, Dorothy, and Virginia that I would come back for them, and I kept my word. Director Foster greeted us with ill-concealed hostility, but she couldn't resist an official investigation. We spent several hours talking to residents and staff, gathering evidence of the facility's violations and illegal practices. "I'm not going back home," said Eleanor, the very woman who had thought Sunshine Valley was a good place. "My house has been sold, my furniture given away." Where can I go? Her words made me think. Many elderly people who had been placed in such institutions against their will had lost not only their freedom, but also their homes, their connection to the outside world, and their sense of dignity. "We will find a solution for everyone who wants to leave here," I promised. "It will take time, but we will not abandon you." The court date was set for mid-June, almost a month after my release from Sunny Valley. During this time, I managed to partially restore order in the house, return some of the items that had been sold. Edmund filed a request for seizure of property, and antique shops were forced to return recently purchased items, and mentally prepare myself to meet my daughter and son-in-law in the courtroom. The day before the hearing, I sat in the living room with Edmund and Octavia, discussing the final details. "Are you nervous, Grandma?" Octavia asked, noticing how I was fiddling with the owl brooch on my blouse. "A little," I admitted. "I never thought I'd be suing my own daughter." "You're not just doing this for yourself," Edmund reminded me. "You're doing it for all the people at Sunshine Valley and other places like it. Your case could set a precedent and help change the system." "I know," I nodded, "and I won't back down. It's just, it hurts, you know? Realizing that your own child is capable of such betrayal, Octavia sat down next to me and took my hand. "Grandma, I'll be with you tomorrow, and I'll tell them everything I saw and heard. They have to answer for what they did." On the morning of the trial, I put on my best suit, dark blue with silver buttons, bought for my last lecture at the university. I pinned the owl brooch, a gift from Henry, to my lapel as a talisman. The Auckland courthouse was impressive in its monumentality. As I climbed the wide steps, I felt a mixture of determination and anxiety. A small group of reporters was waiting for us at the entrance. It turned out that our case had attracted the attention of the local media. "Professor Thorndike," a young journalist addressed me, "is it true that your daughter tried to illegally take possession of your property by placing you in a nursing home against your will?" "All the evidence will be presented in court," Edmund replied for me, gently pushing the reporters aside. "We are confident that justice will prevail." Inside the building, in the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw Willow and Baxter for the first time since my return. They were surrounded by 3 men in expensive suits, apparently their legal team. Willow looked pale and tense, Baxter downright scared. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of emotion in my daughter's eyes. Shame, remorse. But it was quickly replaced by cold determination. She turned away and whispered something to one of the lawyers. Lawrence wasn't with them, which didn't surprise me. My grandson always avoided unpleasant situations, preferring to stay out of the way when things got heated. The courtroom was full. In addition to those directly involved in the trial, there were journalists, law students brought in by Edmund to observe the historic case, and simply curious onlookers. I noticed Lucy, a young nurse from Sunny Valley, sitting in the front row. She smiled at me and gave me a thumbs up. When the judge, an elderly woman with piercing eyes and a stern face, entered the courtroom. Everyone stood up. The trial began. Edmund was the first to speak, presenting the court with documents and evidence. Fake medical reports, a forged power of attorney, photographs of my devastated home, videos taken by Octavia, and testimony from Sunny Valley employees and my neighbors. "Your Honor," he said in his deep, convincing voice, "we have before us a case of flagrant violation of the rights of an elderly person. Professor Agatha Thorndike, a respected member of our community, a former university lecturer, a woman of full capacity, was fraudulently placed in a long-term care facility against her will, with the sole purpose of seizing her property. This is not simply a family dispute. This is a crime." Willow and Baxter's lawyers tried to present the case as a misunderstanding and concern for an elderly relative. "Our clients acted solely out of the best of intentions," claimed the lead defense attorney, a balding man with a honeyed voice. "They were concerned about the safety and well-being of Mrs. Thorndike, living alone in a large old house. Yes, they may have been overzealous, but their intentions were pure." Then it was time for the testimony. I was the first to take the stand and told the court everything from the beginning. How Willow and Baxter had pressured me for months to sell the house and move. How they had lured me to Sunny Valley under the pretext of a spa vacation. How they had confiscated my phone and keys. How I had discovered that my house was being put up for sale without my knowledge. They didn't just take away my freedom, I concluded. They tried to take away my dignity, my independence, my very identity. To turn me from a person with a name, a history, and rights into a faceless resident of an institution. An obstacle to the money from the sale of my house. Octavia spoke after me. I could see how difficult it was for her to testify against her own parents, but she spoke clearly and confidently. "I heard my parents discussing the sale of my grandmother's house, even before they took her to Sunny Valley," she said. "They talked about how they would divide the money and what debts they would pay off. Mom had already placed an ad for the sale and was negotiating with potential buyers. When I asked about Grandma, they first said she was at a spa hotel, then that her stay there had been extended. They started taking out furniture, books, paintings, and selling antiques. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen. The room was completely silent. I saw some of the people present shaking their heads, others glaring angrily at Willow and Baxter." After Octavia's speech, there was a short pause, and when the meeting resumed, something unexpected happened. Willow asked to speak and, to the surprise of her lawyers, took the witness stand. "I want to admit my guilt," she began in a trembling voice. "Everything my mother and daughter said is true. I did plan to sell the house without my mother's consent. I forged the power of attorney and medical reports. I knew that Sunny Valley was not a spa hotel, but a long-term care facility. And I did it not out of concern for my mother, but for the money." There was a commotion in the courtroom. The judge called for order, and Willow's lawyers looked as if they had been struck by lightning. "Why did you decide to confess now?" the judge asked. Willow looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Because listening to Mom and Octavia, I finally realized what I had done. I betrayed the people closest to me for money. I deserved to be punished." Baxter sat with his head down, not looking at his wife. Their lawyers conferred quietly, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. After Willow's confession, the trial continued for several more hours, but the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. The judge retired to deliberate, and when she returned, her face was serious. In the case of Thorndike versus Price, the court finds the defendants Willow Thorndike Price and Baxter Price guilty of fraud, forgery, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted misappropriation of property, she read. The court orders the defendants to compensate the plaintiff, Agatha Thorndike, for material damages in the amount of the value of the property sold, as well as moral damages in the amount of $100,000. In addition, the defendants are sentenced to 3 years of probation with mandatory community service in organizations that help the elderly. After the verdict was announced, Willow approached me in the hallway. She looked 10 years older. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said quietly, "but I want you to know that I truly regret what I did." I looked at my daughter, trying to find in her the little girl I had once taught to distinguish right from wrong. "I believe you are sorry, Willow," I finally replied, "but the trust you broke cannot be restored in a day. It will take time." "I understand," she nodded, "and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." As we left the courthouse, we were again surrounded by reporters. Their questions came from all sides, and photographers clicked away. Edmund took control of the situation. Professor Thorndike is satisfied with the court's decision. This is a victory not only for her, but for all elderly people whose rights and dignity must be protected. Now please let us pass. Lucy was waiting for us at home. She brought a cake, and we celebrated our victory with a small tea party. "I'm quitting Sunny Valley," she announced as she poured the tea. After your case, a full-scale investigation began there. Many residents have already been taken away by relatives or transferred to other facilities. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to medical school," Lucy smiled. "I've always wanted to be a real doctor, not just a nurse. I want to specialize in geriatrics, to really help older people, not like they did at Sunny Valley." "That's wonderful," I said, shaking her hand. "If you need a recommendation or help with your studies, let me know." A month after the trial, life began to return to normal. I went back to working on an article for a literary magazine, resumed meeting with friends, and took up gardening again. Octavia graduated from art college with honors and received an offer for an internship at a prestigious gallery. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I asked her, "What are your plans, Octavia? Will you accept the internship offer?" "I'm thinking about it," she replied, "but I need somewhere to live, and renting an apartment in the city center is expensive." "Stay here," I suggested. "There's enough room for both of us in this house." "And I like having you around, really?" she beamed. "Won't you feel like I'm invading your space?" "No, dear," I smiled. "On the contrary, you enrich it. Besides, I want to pay for your master's degree. You deserve the best education, and I want to help with that." "Grandma, I don't know what to say." Octavia hugged me. "Thank you for everything." At that moment, a familiar Jaguar pulled up in the driveway. Edmund got out of the car, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. "Look, your night has arrived," Octavia whispered, with a mischievous smile. "Don't be silly," I said, feeling myself blush. "Edmund is just a good friend." "A friend who comes every evening with flowers and stays for dinner?" She winked. "Grandma, you can't fool an artist." "I can see how you look at each other." I didn't have time to answer, as Edmund was already climbing the steps to the porch. "Good evening, ladies," he greeted us, handing me a bouquet. "These flowers reminded me of you, Agatha. They are just as bright and resilient." "Thank you, Edmund." I accepted the bouquet, enjoying its fragrance. "You're just in time for dinner." "I brought wine." He took a bottle out of the bag. "Let's celebrate the good news." "What news?" Octavia asked. "The case against Sunny Valley has been closed with a victory," Edmund announced. "The facility is being shut down, and all residents are being transferred to other locations under the supervision of social services. And your case, Agatha, has already set a precedent. 2 more lawsuits from families whose elderly relatives were illegally placed in nursing homes were upheld by the court this week." "That's really great news," I smiled. "So our struggle was not in vain." We moved to the dining room, where Octavia had set the table. Over dinner, Edmund shared the latest legal news. Octavia shared her plans for her internship, and I watched them, feeling deeply grateful for these people in my life. After dinner, Octavia tactfully retired to her room, leaving Edmund and me alone in the living room. "You know, Agatha," he said, sitting next to me on the sofa, "in all these years of our friendship, I have never ceased to admire you. Your strength, your intelligence, your ability to never give up in the face of adversity. You exaggerate my virtues, Edmund," I smiled. "Without your help, I would still be sitting in Sunny Valley." "I don't think so," he shook his head. "You would have found a way out. You always do." He took my hand, and his touch was warm and confident. "Agatha, I don't know how much time we have left in this life. At our age, every day is a gift, and I don't want to waste a single day. I want to spend them with you." I looked into his eyes, still clear and penetrating despite his age, and saw what had always been there, but what I had not noticed or did not want to notice. A deep, sincere feeling. "Edmund, are you proposing—" "I'm proposing that we give a chance to what could have been between us many years ago, if circumstances had been different," he finished. "I'm not talking about marriage or living together. Just the opportunity to be together, to support each other, to enjoy each other's company without fear or prejudice." I thought of Henry, my late husband, of the years I had spent with him, of the love we had shared. But I also thought of the long years of loneliness after his death, of how empty the house sometimes felt, despite all its treasures. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Edmund," I finally replied, squeezing his hand. "Let's give it a chance." He smiled, and there was so much joy and hope in that smile that I felt my heart, which I thought had long since settled down, begin to beat a little faster again. Outside the window, twilight was gathering, enveloping my old house in a soft purple light. The house I had fought for, protected from greed and betrayal. The house that was now filled with life and love again, thanks to Octavia, thanks to Edmund, thanks to the fact that I didn't give up when all seemed lost. When the story came to an end, I said 3 things. First, every person's pain is real and cannot be ignored. Second, self-respect must come first. Third, no one is obligated to stay where they are not appreciated. What about you? How would you act in such a situation? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening from.